Hello, my name is Naomi, and I'm delighted to present my virtual talk, These Shoes Were Made for Talking. And how I want to start my talk to set the context of what is to come is with the next image. So this image is of Maggie. And I met Maggie when she first came to the university I work at, Nottingham Trent. She was a fresher. It was her first week at university. And I invited Maggie and many other individuals to come to an interview and to have a photograph taken in a pair of shoes that they treasured, were just bought, or had a story about, was meaningful to them, with a view of really thinking about how through this shoe, through the experience of putting the shoe on, taking the photograph, we can think about how that shoe links to particular image, to identity, whether that's past, present, or even future. So Maggie was 19 at the time of our interview, and she came and brought along her white Velcro shoes. And part of the process of taking the photograph is that they put the shoes on, we take the photograph, they walk around in the shoes, and from that then we have an interview about what those shoes mean to them, why they've chosen to bring it to this particular interview, how they feel when it's on the foot, what they feel it says about them, any memories of wearing, any hopes, aspirations for the future. So the shoe becomes a real trigger for experience, memory, and identity. So I wanted to just give a little bit of context about Maggie and these shoes. So she'd brought these shoes to the interview really because they were representative of a particular time in her life. Before she came to university, she'd had a year off. She was working full time in an internship in London. It was very grueling, no pay. And because of that, she also had to work in retail at the weekends to fund herself. So although it was a really, really tough time for her, she was really thriving off the pressure and really proud of everything she'd achieved. And she bought these shoes at that time. And she said, these were a kind of real symbol of whatever I set my mind to, I can achieve. And my shoes, they symbolize that. She said they were her white Velcro trophy of sorts. Anyway, next I just want to read a verbatim an extract from her interview about these shoes and what she felt they said about her and why they were meaningful. So I've always felt rather boisterous and gangly, being that I am 5'8", size 7 feet, never very girly, and felt I needed to show fractured sides of myself to different parts of society. However, this shoe, when I wear it, it changes me. It changes the way I carry and look at myself. I'm less aware of how I am walking. I feel smaller, more delicate in a way. Maybe it is the Velcro straps or the innocence of the colour white, but they make me feel young, small, very like me, but in a wonderful way. So this example shows how evocative these shoes are in an image for Maggie, the image of who she is as a person and how she feels. And this image comes from the project that I want to talk about today that really set the context for this paper, which is called Shoe and Tell, that I set up in 2017, called Shoe and Tell. And when I set up Shoe and Tell, it was really with the intention of celebrating teenage identity, individuals like Maggie, who were, transitioning from childhood into adulthood and all those kind of pressures that faces, that changing and excitement that future holds. So my rationale really with Shoe and Tell was to think about how teenagers particularly are growing up in a society where there is so much emphasis on image, how they look, from social media to pressure from peers, societal pressures. So with all that around them, how do they negotiate identity as they move from childhood to adulthood? And I wanted to do that through the shoes as a kind of cultural lens to think about individual and social identity. So I chose shoes because they have a very intimate relationship to the body. They're a worn object, and how they feel on the foot has a distinct bearing on how we stand, posture, how we walk, and then in turn also how we feel. So they're very, very powerful in eliciting those emotions and experiences. So there is also, of course, the aesthetic, how they look in terms of identity, but also identity from how they feel, feeling comfortable in shoes, and all those kind of messages that that can communicate. So the project in its essence is one that is grounded in visual ethnography. It was really important for my research as well to have that visual thing, to be able to take the images, to do the photographing. That was really an important part of eliciting the narratives and getting the data. So those images stand as that record, that document of those individuals at that particular time, but also they, as I will show later, become a way of thinking about how others respond to them, how we can use them, particularly in my role as a lecturer, to get other people to think about identity as an observer, and different ways of thinking about those things. So theoretically, I grounded my research in Van Gennep's rites of passage, sort of thinking about how through life we move through different changes, different transitions. For teenagers, that was really important. They're moving from childhood to adulthood and all those changes that happen. So the shoe was very, very symbolic of that rites of passage as we walk through life in different stages. And adults, particularly at that essence of going to university at the age of 18 into 25, that is seen as that emerging adulthood, where it is a very key stage in identity experimentation and formation, as maybe individuals are leaving home or moving into university life, or maybe even to professional life. So all those things can have a bearing on the negotiation of identity and the kind of images that we project by the choices that we make of what we wear. So I just wanted to go back to some of the data that I've collected from some of my teenagers. In total, I've interviewed around 100 teenagers from the age of 16 through to 19. And this is Jenny here. So Jenny came to an interview with about 2 or 3 of her other friends, and she chose to bring quite a few pairs of shoes to talk about. And the first pair she particularly wanted to talk about were her Dr. Martin shoes. So although she doesn't wear them anymore at that point that I interviewed her, they were really meaningful to her because they represented a time in her life when she had, managed to convince her parents that she could have and should have a pair of Dr. Martens to wear to school. No more of those regulation school shoes, but something that really evoked what she wanted to be, an image she wanted to project. So when she put the shoes on in her interview and for her photograph, it was really, really emotive because she hadn't worn them for a long time, but just to put them on again triggered all those memories of how it felt to be at school, get her first pair of Dr. Martens shoes and be able to go to school wearing these really, really cool things, and be sort of feeling like, well, I'm independent now, I am an individual, I can assert what my choice is rather than what my parents' choice is. And then this other image here, this is from one of her friends. So this is Marsh, and Marsh again bought quite a few pairs of shoes. She bought her Duke of Edinburgh, which is an award you can do in England. And she bought these because she just, doing the Duke of Edinburgh award scheme for her was, really a great achievement. Marching through the countryside, as she says here, I've worn them all over the UK. Their sense of achievement for her, but also all the fun things. And she had never ever cleaned these shoes, so when she took them out of the bag, they really did smell pretty horrendous. But again, putting them on was that, image from the past of what they meant to her. And then she had, on complete different contrast, her over the knee suede high heel boots. And she said, put these on. She said, these are definitely me because they are very fancy. When I put them on, they make me feel like a put together woman, confident, fancy, and a lot taller, which is always helpful when you're 5'2". And then she went on to say, well, a put together woman means you walk around, you know what you're doing, your clothes and shoes reference that. You walk in a place, you feel good in yourself, you feel confident like your shoes can conquer the world. So the age of 17 for Marsh, being feeling like a woman and having that shoes that represented and gave off that image was really important to her. And in terms of the kind of visual ethnographic side of my project, what I try and do as much as I can is to then interview these individuals again at a later stage in their lives. So when I interviewed Marsh at 17, she was still working towards university. So the next slide is this. This is Marsh 2 years later when she's just completed her first year of university. And what is important to her at this point in her life is not being a woman or looking like a woman or feeling like a woman in her high heeled boots, but it's actually kind of fitting into that university life while still feeling like herself. So she has there her Nike white Air Force shoes. She bought them in her first term at Birmingham University in the UK because, as she says, everyone else was wearing them. Was that kind of university kind of uniform, so you wanted to have a pair of to kind of fit into that peer group. But again, in a complete contrast, she says, I bought them because it's what my friends have, but they feel like me. So there's a sense that she still wants to feel like herself, to have that kind of individual image and feeling, but also fitting in. So that kind of paradox between conforming but also being very much an individual. And when I look at the images that have come out of my research project, I find that that's quite a commonality between many of them. So again, these two young ladies, Ella and Matilda, really great friends. They came to the same interview, and both of them were very keen on talking about being an individual. And as Ella says, I prefer to be different. I dislike being the same as others. And it wasn't till I actually printed out the images and I put them up on the wall with their narratives, and I saw actually they're wearing kind of identical brand shoes. Yes, there's a differentiation in the color, but even the trousers they have on have the 3 white stripes down. So the image, when you look at the image, you see that sameness, but it's the narratives that really brings out the nuances of the individuality and why it's, shows that it's that much deeper meaning. So the images alone, they give a sense of style and image of the individuals, but it's the narratives that then give that story behind it and really show that individuality isn't just an image-led thing, it's a much deeper feeling. Some of the other images that I have as well really brought out quite a contrast between the very dirty shoes and the actually importance and value of having those muddy, dirty shoes, because it was about experience and about memories. So here with she wears these shoes all the time, even though they're falling apart, because why get something else dirty. But also, as beyond that, her narratives are very much about, well, that dirt is meaningful because it's about my life experiences, about the places I've been and where I'll go next. And again, on the other side, this is her very clean shoes that she's bought because she loved them. They're about her, but she doesn't want to wear them because they might get dirty. And she'd had them for 2 years and still not worn them because she just didn't want to get them dirty. So that kind of contrast between clean and dirty shoes. And again, there's countless examples here of the dirty trainers. And again, another one here. They're treasured pairs, even though they have so many things, because it's the memories that are embedded in it. So the image kind of shows these values, these things that matter to these individuals. And what I try and do every year is I focus on a particular course that I teach on, and we do this visual kind of photo image led research with the students. We get them to take photos of each other's shoes and talk to each other about what their shoes mean. So they're also involved in creating these images and thinking about how they're representative of identity, but also how the questions they ask and the process of taking that also brings that all together. So here we have Holly. They say I'm cool. So, she chooses shoes because they are cool, but also that very much comes through in the image as well, and her narrative. So for the research, the shoe has really been a really important lens through which identity is performed, negotiated, and captured through the images. And very briefly, I just wanted to show how I built on the project from this stage. And in terms of the rites of passage, I'm now looking beyond the teenage identity to think about specific occasions and how the shoe is used to protect an image of appropriateness or feeling or experience. And I've looked now at graduation and what individuals wear for graduation and how that also links to their choices and their feelings and their experiences. So again, it's ethnographic because we observe all graduation ceremonies in a year and then carry on with that in a longitudinal way. They're very short interviews, but we look particularly at kind of documenting the shoe choice and how it links to the occasion, perhaps how it links to who they are as an individual, how they feel they should dress given maybe what they are graduating from. And then also how that can reveal nostalgia, experiences and memories of being a student. So what we then have is a whole body of images of what students are wearing at graduation at a given time, and then also the narratives that go with that. So just quickly some examples. So this young lady here chose these shoes because she said they're my unicorn shoes. Some magical shoes for a magical day. And then we have this young lady here who wears this because she's now a professional lawyer graduating as such. So she feels they need to reflect that status, but still true to herself as someone who needs to feel glam and sassy. And then this individual here says that, I wouldn't normally wear this. I'm normally a leggings and trainers girl, so it's not me. And when we look at the image, it's really significant because she's actually treading down the back of the shoe, and she was doing that because they felt so uncomfortable and so not her. So the image is really fascinating when you see that kind of thing that's happening, what it records. And this one, I'm wild and my shoes say it all. And this image, I just want to stop on to say the next thing I have done or wanted to do with these images. So I have this body of research of thousands of images now because I've taken multiple different images from graduation and from teenagers to think about then how I could use those images in a teaching context. So this image here is quite a good way to illustrate this. So I've been working with students of linguistics, of creative writing, and what we've done is present them with the image and a very short extract like this here, I'm wild and my shoes say it all. And we've used it for the students to kind of start to think about how they respond to those images. Who is the wearer? What are they like? Where have they been? Where might they go next? So they have this kind of image as a blank canvas to think about who this person might be, what their story is and what their identity is. And we get them to start doing some fictional storytelling from it. And then from that point, we then ask the students to bring in a shoe that represents them. And then we ask them to put them anonymously in a bag so that no one knows which shoe belongs to them. And we lay them out on the floor in a room. And then the students come in and they each pick a shoe. And once they pick that shoe, they then, building again on this process of of storytelling. They write a short poem or a haiku that says something about that person, their identity, who they might be. So they're using it to think about image in a slightly different way. We've got some examples here. So it's been really fascinating way to think about how these images can go beyond just documenting style and identity, but actually to think about how we teach people, as our students, to think creatively or differently about the self and others. So just to conclude, the project is still ongoing and will continue to go on. But what I hope it's shown is how the image is so central in terms of the experience of self, so that taking of the image, taking the photograph, looking at that image, but also how beyond that, in terms of the other, it can initiate a creative and quite deep approach to how we think about and understand identity. Thank you.